Hello everybody, my name's Chris Ward and I'm one of the product managers for the Siemens Electrical Products, and the idea of today is to give you an overview of the 3RM1 motor starter configuration tool. If you don't know about the 3RM1s, I'd recommend that you go back and have a look at one of my YouTube videos which explains the fundamentals of the device and the benefits and features. So today's really mainly all about how to use the newly innovated configuration tool. So for those of you who are interested in learning more, please feel free to get in contact with me. My details are on this slide, as you can see. So first things first, as you can see, we now have this newly laid out 3RM1 configuration platform. But the first question is, where do we find it? So that's what we're going to show you straight away. So if you go into the search engine Google and type in Siemens Industry Mal, hit enter, click on the platform. Once you're in the Siemens Mal, down this left hand side, select Configurator Overview, low voltage controls, 3RM1 motor starters, and then we're away. So as you can see now, we have these three areas that we need to start considering. So the first thing that it asks us for here is the name. So we'll just call this a test. So there's two different types of configuration that you can have with these motor starters. You can have a single protected motor starter, or you can have a grouped motor starter configuration. So we'll run through both methods just to give you a bit of a flavor for the tool. So if you go into single motor starter, it then prompts us for some more questions. On this right hand side, you can see there's a room for a graphical representation that will appear as we start building up the configuration. We'll say yes, we want it to be UL approved, it's going to the UL market, and we want it to be customer configured. And what it means by that is that instead of using a circuit breaker, you can use a fuse instead. Now, as we keep filling in this, it'll prompt us for even more questions. So we've clicked customer configured. It's now said, do we want a fuse module? So the answer to that question is yes, we want our short circuit protection to be fused. So we'll click yes. And then the next prompt is, do we want a Buzzbar adapter for the fuse module? This is the Buzzbar adapter. So the Buzzbar adapter will allow us to connect in multiple ways to the system. So you can either have it going onto a Buzzbar system, you can have it going onto a compact Buzzbar system, or you can have it going directly onto the Buzzbar rail. So to enclose those fuses into a 3RM1 motor starter system, you have to have one of these back bases, so which has already been selected for us because we selected fuse module. But there's multiple ways in which you can connect that module onto the system. It's either through a Buzzbar system or onto a standard mounting rail, and we'll click standard mounting rail. So once that's been selected, we can then start drilling down into the individual components which we've selected. So as you can see, this graphical representation is now showing us our configuration. We can give it a title, so we can call this pump 1. Once you've done that, you can then start to describe the application for the motor starter. So it's all done through selections. As you can see, the ones that are in orange are the ones that are already selected. So what type of switching are we using? Are we using AC53 or AC51? AC53 will utilize for this application. What's the factor for motor starting? If you don't know what these are, you can just simply hover over them and it'll give you a brief explanation as to what they are. Further to that, then we need to know what the current rating is of the motor. We'll say it's a 4 amp device. What type of motor starter is it? Is it a direct online starter or is it a reverser? We'll say it's a reverser. And then from here, it's asking us, do we want to achieve a safety related shutdown? As you can see, if we was to say yes, this should change. So if we click yes, as you can see, it's now given us a fail-safe version of that motor starter. Then it drills down into the more nitty-gritty. What type of mains connectors do we want? What type of control connectors do we want? We'll say we want spring loaded. What's the control supply? 24 volts or 110 to 230. We'll keep it simple. We'll say we want 24 volt DC supply. Do we want plug-in connectors? No, because we've selected mounting on DIMM rail. Do you want labels, adhesive labels? We'll click yes. There's also a cool feature where you can get a sealable cover. So this sealable cover would basically cover this potentiometer to stop people and engineers tampering with it. If it's a particularly cautious application where you don't want somebody to come over and tweak what you've already got, there's a cover which is lockable. So we'll say yes, we would like a sealable cover. And once we've done that, then we can scroll back up to the top and we can fill in the other parts that are missing. So the motor starter section is now complete. Now we have a look at the fuses. So what's it saying about the fuses? It's saying, so you need a set of 3 fuses, and it's even given us a suggestion. So you don't have to use the Siemens versions if you don't want. It's giving us suggestions here as to the minimum rated and the maximum rating of those fuses for the motor starter that we've selected. And then from here, it's also saying what type of fuse module do we want. Do we want a fuse module with the fuses, or do we want it without? For this, we'll say we want it with the fuses, and then we can click add. And once you click add, that should give us a complete configuration. So as you can see now, it now gives us a complete array of all the different components for that system. So we have the motor starter name, which is pump 1, and then we have all the components which are needed for that particular application. And it's as simple as that for completing a single configuration. So the next one which I want to show you is the grouped application. So we'll call this test 2. So if we go to group, we'll keep this one more simplified. So we'll say this one's going into Europe, so it's not going into a UL market. What are the different options? So there's a few more different options here for the short circuit protection. You've got single fusing with a circuit breaker. So that means that each individual motor starter will have a motor starter protector protecting it. Single fusing, which means that each individual motor starter will have a single fuse for each motor starter. Grouped fusing means with a circuit breaker would mean that you would have a circuit breaker which protects a group of motor starters rather than individually protecting each individual motor starter. And it's the same for the grouped fusing on the for a grouped configuration for the 3RM1 motor starters also. So a group of fuses can also protect a bank of 3RM1 motor starters. So for this, what we'll do is we'll say we want grouped fusing with a circuit breaker. And then all we have to do is decide on what we want to use. So do we want to use a bus bar? Yes, we do. Do we want device connectors? Yes, we do. And as you can see, it started to add things into our graphical representation. And then all we have to do is add in the motor starters that we need. So we can go dink, 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 dink. We can start building these up as we're going along. And the beauty of using this is that it will tell you if there are any anomalies. So if you just decide that you want to go ahead and create one of these systems without using this configurator, you could come a cropper. So say, for example, if you was using this mains infeed system, which we selected here, Buzzbar, there is a maximum load on that, which is 25 amps. But if you didn't know that, and you was typing it in on the configurator, it would tell you that. Whereas if you make that mistake in real time and you go away and you configure this system manually, you make that mistake, then you could have issues with your system. Similarly, the other beauty of using this tool is that all our combinations are UL and IEC tested combinations. So our short circuit protection, whether it be fusing or motor starter protectors, we back our products and say that they are certified to cover you in the event of a short circuit to protect these devices. So with a grouped configuration, we'll just remove a few of these to keep it more simplistic. What you can do here is, from here, it's very similar to the other devices. So We've filled in this information, and now we have to build up each of the motor starters. So if we click on a motor starter here, we can say that's for pump 1. What type of switching do we want? We can say it's AC51. So it's a resistive load. We can say it's 5 amps. Do we want a safety related shutdown? We'll say no. We want it to be screw terminals. We don't want labels, and we don't want sealable covers. On to the next one. So if we click that motor starter, it automatically blanks out here. It's left a gap in, as you can see. So what that's basically saying as well is it's restricting us to what we can do with the application. So if you go over a specific amperage, you have to allow for heat dissipation of that device. And what that's done is it's provided a device connector with a blanking plate, which means that you have to leave a space in between. But if you didn't know that and you went ad hoc and you decided to do this manually, and you sandwiched all those motor starters together, then you're going to have problems inside the control cabinet because you haven't given the correct spacing in between the motor starters. But if you use the configuration tool, you can allay those fears and you don't have to worry about it because it takes all that into consideration for you. So obviously we've selected a 5 amp version here. So it's allocated a blanking plate here to alleviate some of the heat dissipation. We'll click on the next one. So what amperage do we want this one to be? We'll say it's a 1 amp. We want it to be a reverser. Once we've done with that and it's complete, we can then move on to the next one. But as you can see, it hasn't allocated a blank for that one, which means that you don't have to leave a blanking plate for a 1 amp version. Similarly, for a 2 amp version, if we was to change the next one to a 2 amp version, it would be the same outcome. Now, if you was to change that again, if we was to go up to say a 4 amp version, it would perhaps give us a blanking plate after a 5 amp version. It would perhaps give us a blanking plate after that. As you can see there, it's allowed for a blanking plate. And then it's given us another additional motor starter position there to allow for the heat dissipation. So once we've done that and we're happy with the motor starter configuration, we can then say, okay, let's have a look at the top and scroll back up. So we've got the device connectors, we've got the buzz bar, all sorted out. That's all been provided for us because we tick the boxes across the top here. And then the only other thing that we need to have a look at here is the motor starter. So with the motor starter, it's automatically calculated that we need a 12 amp version of this circuit breaker. And it's even told us which type we use. It's automatically selected the one that it thinks is capable of managing the short circuit for that bank of motor starters. You can decide whether you want it for a motor starter protection, so a complete motor starter. So you can have them with integrated thermal overload and short circuit protection. You can have them just with short circuit protection as well, or you can have it with a motor starter with an overload relay. For this particular application, we'll select it for a motor starter and we'll say we want it to give us our selection automatically. Do you want an auxiliary on the motor starter? We'll say yes. Once we've done that, you can dictate what size you want it to be. I would normally suggest that you'd probably want it to be the smallest size, which is size S00. And then once you're happy with that, you can add that to the list, and then you get a complete product line suggestion of all the parts that you're going to need to complete that system. So as you can see, it's a really useful tool to utilize. So it effectively covers you for any caveats in the system. So if you need to leave gaps for heat dissipation, if you're using the mains in-feed system, are you going over the 25 amps exceeded? All that stuff is considered within the tool. So use it. It's a really great tool to use. It's a new tool. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to contact me. Hopefully you found the video useful, and please stay tuned for more. Thanks very much for watching.